storm. Yo, it's the war cry, sound the alarm. Nations drop the trouble when they hear the Most High's arm. Yo, this ain't a game, prophecy's emotion. Joel 3, come see what's been spoken. Let the weak say, I'm strong. Pick up the sword. Nations got around, get ready for war. Old Tyre, Sidon, yo, what y'all about to do? Payback's coming, I ain't talking about a truce. They sold us to the Greeks, shippers cross the seas. But now the Most High bringing judgment with ease. Mount Sinai's where the justice gon' reign. It's payback season. Watch Babylon feel the pain. Put you in the sickle, the harvest is ripe. The vine press full, yeah, the judgment in sight. Come out the gap, come even so. Ever so dead, do I cancel the show? Put you in the sickle, the harvest is ripe. The wine press full, yeah, the judgment in sight. Come out the gap, come even so. Ever so dead, do I cancel the show? Multitudes in the valley of decision. Sun turned to darkness, watch the kingdom start shifting. Abiyah roar from Zion, shake the land. Enemies tremble, they don't stand a chance. Egypt decimate, Edom paid the cost for all the innocent blood that they spilled and they lost. But Judah gon' rise, forever remain. The Most High dwells here, he remember our pain. Sign the show fine, watch it run. Time's up for these nations, justice begun. Desires restored, the wicked decay. Yo, Joel 3, let the scriptures replay. Put you in the sickle, the harvest is ripe. The wine press forward, yeah, the judgment in sight. Come out and now, come even so. Episode did do that care for show. This ain't no fable, it's the end time script. Yo, black man, wake up. Truth's been flipped, no one changed, no one lies. No one to see. The Most High rise, Babylon face to feet. Put you in the sickle, the harvest is ripe.
Welcome to the debate. Imagine, if you will, that archaeologists unearthing a sealed jar in a desert cave discover an ancient prophetic scroll.
Right. Like something right out of Qumran.
Exactly. They carefully unroll the parchment, translate the ancient Hebrew, and they expect to read about, Babylon or Rome or ancient empires. But instead, they find descriptions of a basketball court.
A 24-second clock.
Yeah. The National Basketball Association, and a tragic figure referred to as the Black Mamba. So how do we interpret this profound collision of sacred prophetic structure and, frankly, modern cultural iconography?
It is incredibly jarring. Today, we are examining the proper interpretive framework for the Apocalypse of Isaiah, which is a fascinating text written by a figure known only as Isaiah of the Captivity.
Right. And what makes this text so compelling is that it relies entirely on the Holy Bible as its sole authority and source material. Yet it maps those ancient biblical doctrines onto the hypermodern world of American sports and geopolitics.
So our central question today is this. Should readers interpret Isaiah's apocalypse as a literal historical prophecy or as a strict symbolic allegory?
I mean, is the Lord of NBA hosts parable a literal millennial blessing pointing to the earthly vindication of true Israel in America? Or is it strictly a parable pointing metaphorically to Yahusha, Jesus Christ, and cosmic spiritual warfare?
Well, I will be arguing today that focusing on the literal damnation of specific athletes or reading this as a literal geopolitical roadmap, it entirely misses the profound theological framework of this text. I believe Isaiah of the Captivity has crafted a masterful, modern allegory designed to warn a terminal generation about spiritual apostasy, not a literal sports league.
And I will be arguing that the text demands a literal historical reading. I believe it is pointing to the tangible, physical judgment of modern idolatry and the literal geopolitical vindication of the transatlantic slave descendants.
It is a pleasure to be here, by the way. You have set up the tension perfectly.
Glad to have you. Look, if I'm listening to this at home, I'm probably thinking, how can a text about Kobe Bryant in the NBA be taken seriously as ancient prophecy?
Yeah, it sounds absurd at first glance.
Right. But from my perspective, the text simply does not allow the reader to escape into the safety of pure allegory. It demands to be read literally because it anchors itself in highly specific, falsifiable historical markers. I mean, look at chapter 4.
The timeline?
Exactly. The prophecy is grounded in a precise timeline. It states this vision came to pass in the 401st year of the captivity of Yahudah in the land of America.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a floating symbolic number. It aligns strictly with the biblical covenant made to Abram in Genesis 15 regarding the 400 years of affliction in a foreign land.
I see where you're going with this.
So therefore, the texts claim that true Yashrael, true Israel, are the transatlantic slave descendants is a literal historical reality. It's a geographical, physical claim.
I come at it from a different way. I believe that reading this strictly literally fundamentally misunderstands the genre of apocalyptic literature.
How so?
Well, reading apocalyptic texts literally it's like reading a political cartoon literally. If you look at a political cartoon and think the artist is warning us about a literal giant donkey fighting a literal giant elephant in Washington, D.C., you've completely missed the point about American politics.
But you can't just dismiss the literalism of the text because the imagery is jarring to our modern sensibilities.
Oh, I'm not dismissing it. I'm elevating it. Apocalyptic texts always use the familiar language and empires of their contemporary culture to reveal hidden spiritual realities.
Okay, but the text explicitly names Kobe Bryant, stating Mamba out in the pit, and describes him repenting for exchanging his soul for greatness.
Right, but the text uses the NBA, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan not to give us literal postmortem updates on basketball players. It uses them as a profound theological allegory for Yeshua's ultimate triumph over Satan.
You really think it's just an archetype?
I do. Consider the imagery, the black serpent or mamba ascending above the stars of God is a direct, unmistakable symbolic parallel to Lucifer's rebellion in Isaiah 14. And the text introduces Isaiah Lord Thomas III as the Lamb of the NBA, with Michael as the Archangel. I mean, these are strictly symbolic archetypes pointing directly to Yeshua HaMashiach battling Satan. The basketball court is merely a conceptual framework.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. If we look at biblical history, idolatry is never just a spiritual abstraction. It is always manifested in literal, physical structures and cultural systems.
Okay, fair enough.
Think of the golden calf at Mount Sinai. Moses didn't treat the golden calf as a mere symbol of internal distraction. He didn't say, well, this just represents the greed in our hearts.
He destroyed it.
He ground it into powder and made the Israelites drink it. It was a literal physical idol. I argue that the text portrays the NBA in the exact same way. It is a literal modern idol referred to in the text as the pride of the Kasdium's excellency.
The pride of Babylon.
Right. For those listening, Kasdium is the ancient Hebrew term for the Chaldeans, meaning Babylon. So the pride of Babylon's excellency. Yahweh is literally judging this physical idol.
But is it literally a judgment on the basketball hoops?
When the text says, the high rims are made low, each and every rim and backboard are, yea, wholly rent asunder, it is describing the tangible destruction of human achievement and idolatry. It is a direct indictment of the specific cultural idols that the captive Yashrael worship today. Why would the author use such precise, modern names if not to pronounce a literal judgment?
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered how the author specifically constructs these descriptions to function as archetypes rather than literal indictments?
Give me an example.
Let's look at the broadcasting crew. The text gives us detailed, vivid descriptions of the Dream Hakeem Olajuwon, the round mound of rebound Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kenny Smith.
Yeah, the TNT crew.
Exactly. But look at how they are functionally used in the narrative. They are invoked as symbolic archetypes of worldly distraction and human futility. The dream represents unmatched footwork and human grace. The round mound represents brute physical strength.
Right. They're the pinnacle of the sport.
But in the vision, they all suffer defeat. The text is using Hall of Fame players to represent the absolute peak of human glory. The rims and backboards being rent asunder symbolize the shattering of all human achievement when confronted with the glory of God.
But why basketball? I mean, why not Wall Street or Hollywood?
Because in the American context, the arena is the modern temple, and the athletes are the modern demigods. If we reduce this to a literal attack on a sports league, we shrink the majesty of the text.
Shrink it?
Yeah, it's not about a basketball game. It's about the futility of human pride in the face of the Almighty. The text explicitly states that the Mamba desired to sit enthroned upon the Mount of Rushmore, beyond the clouds. That is the exact language of cosmic rebellion. It's the language of Genesis and Isaiah, not sports commentary.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I don't disagree that there are profound theological themes at play, or that the arena functions as a modern temple.
Glad we agree on that much.
But the cosmic rebellion you mention is precisely why the literal interpretation is so vital. You cannot separate the spiritual rebellion from the physical perpetrators.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning the text does not shy away from literal historical geography. This brings us to the identity of true Israel. The text explicitly cites America as the virgin daughter of Babel and the land of the Kasdim's excellence.
Yes, it does.
It explicitly names Great Britain as the mother who conceived the transatlantic slave trade, stating true Israel was taken captive there. This isn't just spiritualized language about all humans being captive to sin.
Well,
It is identifying a specific historical group of people, the transatlantic slave descendants, as true Yashrael. And here is the crucial part that the outline of this prophecy demands we acknowledge. The literal restoration of these people during the 1,000-year reign of Christ is the ultimate warning to the nations.
referred to prophetically as Edom or Esau.
Yes. So how do you reconcile a purely symbolic interpretation with such explicit, falsifiable geopolitical markers?
Oh, I certainly don't dismiss those geopolitical markers. The historical trauma of the transatlantic slave trade is undeniably real. But I view those markers through the lens of typological shadows, which, by the way, is a term the text itself uses.
Let's define typological shadows for a moment, just so we don't lose anyone listening.
Absolutely. In biblical theology, a type is a historical event or person that foreshadows a greater future spiritual reality. For example, the literal Passover lamb in Egypt was a type or a shadow of Christ, the ultimate lamb.
Right, standard biblical typology.
So when the text speaks of the physical captivity in America, it is using that historical reality as a shadow to represent a broader, overarching spiritual captivity of all humanity.
Even with the explicit mention of the transatlantic slave trade?
Yes. The author's primary focus is the spiritual state of what he calls the terminal generation. The text speaks of the global plague, the mark of the beast described as a scan in the right hand or forehead, and a universal apostasy. The physical captivity of a specific people is a profound, tragic microcosm of the spiritual captivity of the entire globe under sin.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it threatens to erase the specific, tangible justice the text promises.
How does it erase justice?
If you say the physical captivity is just a microcosm of global spiritual captivity, you spiritualize away the literal crime. The text explicitly states that Yahweh will repay their iniquity and their sin double, because the nations have defiled his land and filled his inheritance with abominations.
Which is true spiritually as well.
But it literally mentions withholding the just wages of the slave laborers who built the lavishness of the nation to the heavens. That is a demand for literal historical justice. You can't have spiritual deliverance without physical justice, which is exactly why the text names America and Great Britain.
But the deliverance the text points to transcends geopolitical borders.
It doesn't just transcend them, it acts upon them. Furthermore, the text claims that hindsight from the millennial reign of Christ will prove this literal interpretation correct.
You mean the timestamps?
Yes. The specific naming of Kobe and the timestamp of the 401st year of captivity in America serve as undeniable, literal proof texts for the time of Jacob's trouble, a period of unprecedented tribulation prophesied in Jeremiah.
Right.
When true Israel is literally geographically vindicated, it will stand as the ultimate proof of the Bible's authority. People might be drawn in by the controversy of the NBA parable, but the literal geopolitical vindication of Yasharel will be what truly shakes the world.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
By hyper-focusing on pinpointing historical timelines and demanding literal geopolitical vindication, you minimize the eternal transcendent theology of the text. The greatest warning to this terminal generation is not a geopolitical shift, it is what the text calls the curse of eternal immaturity.
What exactly is the curse of eternal immaturity?
It is the grave spiritual danger of selling one's soul for worldly greatness. It's the delusion that earthly trophies, fame, and wealth can satisfy the eternal soul.
Okay.
That tragedy is perfectly encapsulated by the Mamba's wailing from the pit. It was not worth it. That cry is not meant to be a literal journalistic dispatch from hell regarding a specific celebrity. It is the ultimate parable of human regret.
A morality play.
Yes. The text uses the mythology of the NBA to construct a modern morality play where Christ, the Lamb, defeats the serpent. It asks the reader, what does it profit a man to gain the entire league, to have his name on Mount Rushmore, if he loses his soul?
Which is a profound question.
And that spiritual warning is universally applicable. It speaks to the investment banker just as much as it speaks to the athlete. It is vastly more important than proving a literal historical timeline about who ruled what territory.
But doesn't that symbolic reading strip the text of its prophetic teeth?
I don't think so.
Well, if the mamba is just an archetype of regret, and America is just a metaphor for worldly corruption, then the prophecy demands nothing of us in the physical world. The text warns of the time of America's imminent crash. It explicitly says, the day of vengeance is in Yahweh's heart.
Right.
It commands the captive people to remove out of the midst of America, go forth out of her borders. Those are literal instructions for physical survival. If you spiritualize America into just an idea, you spiritualize away the urgency of the physical deliverance.
It's a spiritual departure.
The text relies on the Holy Bible as its sole authority. And throughout biblical history, when God said he would destroy Babylon or Egypt, he meant literal Babylon and literal Egypt.
True. Historically.
The judgment was physical, the deliverance was physical, and the vindication was physical. To say this is merely an allegory of the Lamb defeating the serpent inside our hearts is to ignore the explicit commands to physically depart from a doomed nation.
I am not suggesting the text has no physical implications, but rather that apocalyptic language operates on multiple dimensions simultaneously.
Meaning,
when the text says to flee America, it is echoing Revelation 18's command to come out of her, my people. Historically, Christians have understood that as a call to spiritual separation from the corrupt systems of the world, regardless of their geographical location. You can geographically leave America, but still be entirely captive to the idolatry of Babel in your heart.
true, but leaving Babylon physically was still a requirement for the Israelites.
Yes, but look at how the text overlays these concepts. The brilliance of this text is how it overlays the modern American empire and its supreme cultural export, the NBA, with the ancient biblical motifs of Babylon and the kingdom of God.
Right, the jarring combination we talked about.
Exactly. When Isaiah Lord Thomas III is presented as the Lamb of the NBA and Michael as his archangel, the author is deliberately jarring us. He is taking the modern pantheon of sports deities and subjugating them to Yahusha. The text tells us that in the beginning the Lord made all things NBA, mapping the creation narrative onto the league.
It's a bold rhetorical move.
It is a profound rhetorical device to show that Christ is Lord even over the things our modern culture idolizes most. It is an allegory designed to wake up a generation that is completely asleep in the pews but wide awake for the playoffs. It forces them to see the spiritual warfare happening on the hardwood.
I hear what you're saying about the symbolism, but, you're stripping the text of its teeth when it comes to the specific claims of the author.
How so?
When the text discusses the 660 and 6 and ties it to the first global plague and a mutual treaty involving an enumerating sixth man of eschatological sorts, it is tethering its spiritual truths to specific observable events in our recent history.
The pandemic era?
Exactly. The author Isaiah of the Captivity explicitly claims to be writing what he was shown concerning things that are shortly taking place. If we treat the NBA parable as pure allegory, we give ourselves permission to treat the identification of true Israel, the 400-year timeline, and the impending fall of America as pure allegory as well. And if everything is an allegory, then nothing is a historical promise.
But why does an allegory mean it isn't a promise?
Because a promise requires physical fulfillment. I maintain that the text's power lies in its literalism. The shock of reading about Kobe Bryant's literal fate in the afterlife is intentional. It forces the reader to realize that the God of the ancient Hebrews is actively, literally judging the modern world today, right down to our entertainment.
It certainly gets your attention.
It's a wake-up call that the judgments of God didn't stop in the first century. They are happening right now in the very arenas we buy tickets to.
Well, I understand the desire for that kind of concrete physical certainty, but I would argue that true prophetic power actually lies in the enduring nature of its symbols.
Meaning it lasts longer?
Let's think about this logically. If the text is purely a literal prediction about a specific basketball player or a specific political timeline, it becomes a static artifact the moment that timeline passes. It becomes old news.
I don't think vindication is ever old news.
But if it is an allegory about the nature of idolatry, pride, and the inevitable triumph of the lamb over the serpent, it speaks to every generation until the end of time. The text explicitly tells us that the black serpent is he who leadeth all his followers downward with him.
The Lucifer parallel.
That is the language of the Garden of Eden, not the Staples Center. The author is taking the tragic, sudden death of a massive cultural icon and elevating it into a mythic warning about the fragility of human glory.
So you see the Mamba's cry as the universal cry of the damned.
Exactly. The Mamba's cry, why, oh why, didst thou not hearken within, is the cry of every soul that prioritized the temporal over the eternal. It's the ultimate articulation of the curse of eternal immaturity. The text is a manual on spiritual warfare, using the playbook of the NBA to diagram the battle for the human soul. The basketball court is just the chalkboard.
Well, we've covered an immense amount of ground today, and the tension between our frameworks is incredibly clear.
Definitely.
From my perspective, the Apocalypse of Isaiah must be read as a literal historical reality. The text explicitly relies on the Holy Bible to establish a concrete timeline, marking the 401st year of captivity in America, and identifying the transatlantic descendants as the literal true Yashrel.
Right.
The NBA parable, in this view, is not merely a symbolic story. It is a literal, tangible warning about the judgment of modern American idolatry. By going so far as to name specific cultural figures, like Kobe Bryant, and detail their literal fate, the author demonstrates that Yahuwah is executing real geopolitical and physical vengeance on the high places of this terminal generation, serving as a warning to Edom and the surrounding nations.
And I maintain that the true brilliance and theological depth of this text can only be unlocked through a symbolic, allegorical interpretation. By hyper-focusing on the literal damnation of athletes or parsing out specific historical timelines, we miss the overarching Christological framework.
The morality play aspect.
Yes. The text masterfully uses the modern mythology of the NBA, framing the Mamba as Lucifer and Isaiah Thomas and Michael as archetypes of the Lamb and the Archangel, to explain eternal spiritual warfare to a modern audience. It is a profound parable warning a terminal generation against the curse of eternal immaturity and the tragic exchange of one's soul for fleeting earthly greatness. It's about the heart, not the hardwood.
Despite these deeply different frameworks, it seems we have found significant common ground in the text's ultimate purpose.
I agree.
We both agree that this text serves as a stark, uncompromising warning to a terminal generation. We also agree that the author utilizes the Holy Bible as his absolute foundation to condemn idolatry, human pride, and the tragedy of exchanging one's soul for earthly greatness. The blending of pop culture with theology forces us to look at what we actually worship, and that is a terrifying but necessary reflection.
Precisely. We remain in respectful tension over the mechanics of that warning. We disagree on whether the literal geopolitical restoration of transatlantic descendants and the specific naming of Kobe Bryant are the focal points, or whether they serve as the symbolic scaffolding for a broader eternal allegory of Christ defeating the serpent. But the urgency of the message and the reality of the spiritual war it describes is undeniable in either reading.
It really is a reminder of the necessity of intellectual charity when approaching complex prophetic texts.
Always.
The blending of ancient biblical structure with modern cultural icons is jarring. It makes us uncomfortable, and it demands careful, rigorous thought. We encourage you, as always, to return to the source material yourself. Weigh the literal historical timestamps and the demands for physical justice against the profound allegorical imagery, and determine how you hear the voice of the prophet.
Indeed. The text, above all else, invites us to look closer at what we worship.
Think back to our opening image, that ancient prophetic scroll sitting right next to a pair of modern basketball shoes. When the dust finally settles on our civilization, what will the artifacts we leave behind say about what we truly worshipped? Thank you for joining us.